So are there any questions that y'all had lingering from resumes on Monday? Yes.
I do have one. So I think you covered it, but I don't really remember. I guess I've slept since then. What are your thoughts about like color? Because like when I apply for my OSU stuff, like some of my headings are orange. But like when I apply for professional stuff, it's black. So like I don't know, what is your thought on that?
I have always been told, and I think it's pretty good advice, black and white.
Okay.
You know, that your resume paper, you probably don't want it to be a stark white because you're buying that resume paper. So you could do like an ivory color or even kind of that light yellowish. Y'all know what I'm talking about, like that color. But really, again, color, although you may say like, ooh, it grabs their attention, it's actually distracting because what's the first thing they're looking at is the design and the color, when really, again, you want them to be able to quickly look at stuff. So
okay.
I think it's just better to err on the side of just black and white.
Then tell one thing that they trash it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
If you submit a resume online, do you also bring one into the interview?
Yes. So that is a great question. Anytime you are going to an interview, if you at least know your interview schedule ahead of time and how many people you're going to meet with, always have that many hard copies with you. So it just looks really good that you're like, hey, you know, in case you didn't print this out, I have another copy for you here. It's also really good if y'all are going to career fairs or internship fairs. If you go to the Cargill thing next week, take a copy of your resume with you. They walk away. They have something with your name on it, even if you're going to submit it again to them by email. So I just think anytime you're in that job or internship hunt, you need to always have a hard copy with you. I've kind of always had the rule of thumb of like 10. Always have 10 printed copies ready to go at any time. Any other questions? All right. We will jump into cover letters. Did y'all bring a copy of your cover letter today or a draft of one? Awesome. We're not going to quite do what we did on Monday as far as like passing it around, just because there's a lot more reading kind of involved with cover letters and nuances. And so what I would like for you to do, though, is if you have yours in front of you, as we go through the different parts of a cover letter, make your own remarks and be critical of your own cover letter to see if you have these things incorporated or not. What's the purpose of a cover letter? Expand what you have on your resume. Fill in everything that you can't put on your resume. What else?
You kind of prove that that's what that you really want to do out, like show that you're extremely interested.
Yeah, so to showcase your interest in the job.
I guess that's kind of what I was going to say, like express your interest in why you would fill their gap.
Yeah.
Specifically, because you can't put that on a resume.
Right.
So
like you. Really, yeah, like you can hope that all the experience and skills that are listed on your resume answer the question, but the cover letter really, I think, kind of shows that personal side of you, and again expands on those things that you just don't have time to expand on a 1 or 2 page resume. One thing I will tell y'all is that sometimes things that you apply for may not ask for a cover letter. It may just say, hey, submit the application and your resume. Should you do a cover letter? Yes. Always err on the side of including a cover letter. If they don't request it, but you do one, that's showing just even a little bit more initiative. So always err on the side of doing one. So the first thing about a cover letter is, again, it links your resume to the position or the organization. This is really important for y'all at this standpoint because some of your work experience or your job experience may not look like it's directly related to the internship you're applying for or the job you're applying for. And so this is your place to help really draw those connections. And what I would say is it's your place to really emphasize transferable skills. So when you say you had this part-time job all through college, what were the specific skills that you were able to work on that you think are going to be relevant and needed in this job? So you're able to make those connections that perhaps your resume can't make. Okay, so then the next important piece again, is it provides details you can't include or are unable to expand on in your resume. What are some things that you may want to talk about in a cover letter that aren't going to show up on your resume?
Like elaborating, like it's kind of what Carly said yesterday, like you would want to put where you're from because it's a way to like form a connection, but also like if you're applying to like Cargill or someone that produces beef, like saying my family was involved in farm and ranching, I've been exposed to it my entire life, like showing some of your background story that you could elaborate on to how that taught you soft or hard skills.
Absolutely. So that background information of why you're even interested in the position to begin with. I would even go to say, as far as, again, with jobs like companies with Cargill or those that you know that there's a likelihood they may want to move you, you can actually say in your cover letter that you are open to moving and have a desire to explore new opportunities. I mean, you can't put that on your resume anywhere, can you? But you can say that. And is that something they're probably going to want to look for? Yeah, absolutely. And you're giving them a talking point. I think that's another thing to think about is when you're in an interview, your resume and your cover letter usually drives what you're asked in your interview. And so maybe there's something that you're like, I can't put this on my resume, but I want to talk about it in my interview. By putting it or kind of giving a nugget of it in your cover letter, you're giving more of an opportunity to them to say, hey, you mentioned this. I want to know more. And so they ask more about it. One thing that I've had advice before from like HR people is they say, sometimes, and again, everybody's situation is different in school, but sometimes you may have a ton of work experience, but no like real club or extracurricular involvement, right? Because maybe for financial reasons, you've had to work full-time while going to school full-time. So it might not look like you have leadership or involvement experience. And I think sometimes students get really stressed about that because they feel like they've got to have it all, right? And if I don't have it all, I'm not going to be a well-rounded candidate. That's not the case. Maybe you explain in your cover letter. And it's not that you're providing like an excuse or you directly point out that you don't have a lot of involvement or things like that, but you say, as a full-time student and full-time employee, I was able to learn these things over the years. So you're kind of intuitively letting them know what your situation was that, again, might not be clear on your resume. Why do you think employers might want to know that type of information?
I mean, it could show that you're a hard worker and like you're dedicated, like you know what you need to be doing.
Absolutely. So maybe you don't show those leadership abilities in your professional involvement or club organizations, but you can talk about how being a full-time student and then being a full-time employee, how you're able to still gain some of those same skills that way. Same thing goes a lot of times for student athletes. Like student athletes will say, I don't have a whole lot of work experience because my work was playing a sport on campus all the time. Well, we can help you come up with a lot of ways and benefits of being a student athlete and how to translate that into work experience. So again, cover letter gives you places to kind of talk about that more in detail. So the specific things that need to be there. Usually, and especially for y'all, you aren't going to have like a predetermined template. Like if now working here in the department, like we have our own letterhead. So a lot of times if I write a letter, it's going to have that letterhead on it because that's who I work for. Y'all aren't really working for anybody, right? So there are certain ways that you need to format what it looks like. So you want to make sure your heading. There's 3 pieces to this. The very first part is going to be a complete return address. You don't put your name there, so you don't say, like I wouldn't say Lauren Klein, my home address, whatever. I would just put my home address. Okay? So this is kind of standard. People know that first address that's listed on the letter is going to be your return address. Yes?
Something I've learned in the past, like if you are turning in like references, resume, cover letter, it's like have the same heading on all 3. Is that, you think that's right?
Yes. So I would say if you created some type of heading with your resume, you probably want that same heading to be on your cover letter. But if you don't, then this is kind of the typical format you would follow because your heading is going to have your return address on it, right? So that's one thing. When I take a look at yours individually, I can let you know, hey, you really look like you have more of a design here. This could be consistent. If it's not on your resume, then you want to follow this more traditional format. Then you're going to have a space, and then that next line is going to have the date. And then the line after that is you're going to put who this letter is addressed to. And I'm going to tell y'all, this is probably one of the most important pieces where a lot of times students make mistakes. You need to say who exactly you're sending this to, and that requires you to do a little bit digging to know who is it that's reviewing your application, reviewing your resume, reviewing your letter. So for instance, if you're applying to Farm Credit, are you just going to say that the inside recipient address is the main Farm Credit office in Oklahoma City? If you're applying to the one in Tulsa and it's the HR department in Tulsa, you need to be that specific, right? And then the person that you, again, the salutation, who it's to, so dear so-and-so, if you just like absolutely cannot find the information, you can say to whom it may concern, but you may want to say to dear, you can probably find out who is the HR director. Or if it's a committee, so a lot of times companies, especially for internships, might have internship review committees. You might say, dear internship hiring committee, something like that, but you want to be specific. You don't want to just say, dear Farm Credit. Who are you writing the letter to, right? So you want to be specific there. And it's very important to convey a professional business tone. So how would you address someone in a letter professionally? Dear. Dear so-and-so. And usually you want to use a colon after that, so not a comma. Dear so-and-so. The colon's kind of a little bit more direct, whereas the comma makes it seem like a more personal letter. I will also say this is one thing that happens that you need to be aware of. How many of y'all were raised to always call someone older than you Mr. or Mrs.? Okay. Adulting is so hard, y'all, because there's like this weird period in time where you're like, do I keep calling people Mr. and Mrs. or do I start calling them by their first name? Like, I feel disrespectful if I don't do this. Thing that you've got to know is as you transition into the professional world, you still want to be respectful, and so there are certain titles that you always want to address people by those titles, but we also have to realize that sometimes those titles can be presumptuous. And what I mean by that is that if the hiring director that you're writing this letter to is a female, how do you address them? Which one is it? Is it Miss? Huh? One of these. Do not. It is, even if you think you know that they're married, because MRS is a sign that a woman's married, right? Even if you know they are, don't just assume. And the reason for that is imagine if you're single and you keep getting letters. People are. It's an assumption, and sometimes that can be offensive to people, and so you've got to be aware of that. So oftentimes what I say is also include their first name. So if it's Mrs. Lauren Klein or Mr. Chad Klein, don't just say Miss Klein, Mr. Klein. Go ahead and put the full name there too. So that's a professional way to do it. If you know that they have their doctorate, you say Dr. So-and-so, male or female, either way. Honestly, I would even tell y'all that in a lot of professional settings, the need to even have like this salutation, the title, isn't really necessary. Unless it's Dr. So-and-so, judge, whatever. You know what I mean? That it really goes with their identity.
It's okay to just address it their name and not the title.
Mm-hmm.
And always first and last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, again, it's kind of a cultural thing that probably, and again, I'm not from Oklahoma, so I can't speak for culture here, but I can speak for what my culture would have been in Florida or Alabama. We would have expected Mr. or Mrs. My sister-in-law is from Chicago, and she hates when people call her Miss whatever. She's like, no. She doesn't even like you saying yes, ma'am. She's like, just say yes. Like, again, it depends on where you're raised. So you kind of have to know what's appropriate and what's not for where you're applying to. Any questions about that? Okay, so kind of take a look. Make sure those pieces are on your cover letter. If it's not, or you've got things out of order, make a note to fix that. There's usually 3 sections, and I mean, what that pretty much tells you is that your cover letter should oftentimes be a minimum of 3 paragraphs. So you always want the first one to really be an introduction. This is another one of those things that you've got to think about the order that your letter's being read in and what makes the most sense. Sometimes we want to jump in and just say how much we love this job and all of our experiences, and you don't even tell them who you are first, right? So really that whole first paragraph, and I'll show you some examples, should be, I am so-and-so. I am a student majoring in this at Oklahoma State University, and I am applying for this specific position. So again, connect it to the job posting. Your second paragraph, that body, again, this doesn't have to be just one paragraph. You've got to write it in a way that makes sense for you. But what things do you think you should include in the body of a cover letter?
Expand on those qualities.
Expand on those qualities.
Experiences that you can't fit that are relevant.
Mm-hmm. So all of those things that just aren't on your resume. But what you've got to make sure you do is tie it back to the job. This is where when we say your cover letter needs to be written specifically for the job you're applying for and should be different for every job, this is where you've got to change it. Maybe it's more important for you to highlight what you've done in your major for this particular job, but for another job, it's really more important that you highlight the things you've done over the summer, right? What is it that's going to be more relevant to that job? So and tie it. Again, you look back at that job posting, and if they say they're looking for someone who's worked in a team setting and can work with a diverse group of people, put that language in there somewhere and talk about how you've done that. Remember I told y'all last week or on Monday that a lot of times they have scanning systems that look for keywords. If they put it in their job posting, more than likely that's a keyword or key phrase they're scanning to look for in your resume or cover letter. So got to fit those things in. And then you have a conclusion. And in this third or final paragraph, you want to, again, reiterate your interest in the specific position. And you want to be direct. You don't want to say, I hope to hear from you. Say, I look forward. I look forward to speaking with you about this position, and I may be contacted at. Give your phone number and your email address. Okay? And so something to note there is if you are putting your phone number and your email address in that paragraph, does it need to be in your heading? No. So make sure and take that off. That would be redundant information. And then you put your name at the bottom. So again, since your name isn't at the top with your address, it's at the bottom. And you sign. Here's a little tidbit that someone told me. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's always stuck in my head and I do it. Sign your letters with a blue pen. Why should you do that?
It's different.
Stands out. It's different. Usually we're printing these letters out with black ink, right? It lets them know that you physically signed it rather than it just being a scanned in signature that you popped in. I use scanned signature sometimes for things, but it's a weird thing, but it's just a little bit more personal. So at least have one blue pen on hand. And then you have an enclosure line. So right at the very bottom, you would space down to the very last line of your cover letter. You would say enclosed, colon, and then you're going to say resume attached. So again, that kind of lets them know that this cover letter goes with your resume. So that's a formal, professional way of doing a cover letter. Yeah, we've kind of gone over this. Your introduction, that first paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences long, like very straight and to the point. Again, the why and the what is what you're focused on, that first paragraph. The why and the what. So here's an example. In response to your advertisement in the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, please consider me for the position of automotive technician. You're telling them what you're applying to and then why you're sending them this letter. So it's not why you want to apply for the job, it's why they're receiving your resume. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the body, again, you're connecting yourself, exactly why you're qualified. And really, y'all focus on the 2 or 3 main things here. Again, the 2 or 3 main things that are important to that job. Yes. So an example, some people, and this could be kind of your preference, some people write better in paragraph style. Some people like to do bulleted points. So you've just, again, it's going to depend on the job you're applying for and what is most comfortable to you. So know that you can do either or. And then, again, that conclusion. How do you show appreciation in a cover letter? And why do we do that?
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your time and consideration of my application for this position.
I've always heard, though, that you're not supposed to say that because it's insinuating that they're actually considering you. And they might not be.
But if you applied, aren't they considering you?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're going to trash it, you're still...
Yeah. I've always been told to do it. Again, it's just kind of like a respectful way to end it. Thank you for your time and consideration. It's always better to be more direct. And this is, it just takes something to learn because it's like, you wouldn't be applying for the job if you didn't think you were qualified, right? So why not just go ahead and own it that you think you're qualified? And so thank you for for looking at my application. I look forward to hearing from you. And you can sign sincerely. That's usually the best way to go, sincerely. Or you could say with gratitude, or what have you. Yes?
If they get that far, then it's considered you for something.
If they're reading your letter.
Yeah, they've actually read it that far.
Yeah. So. Yep, end positively and confidently. Big thing. I really like this recommendation. Focus on how you can benefit the company, not on how the job can help you. So this is where it kind of ties back to the career objective piece of if you cannot be clear in your career objective how you are going to help this company, and it sounds more like you're just wanting to leech off of them and get whatever you can out of it, don't include the career objective. You've got to be mindful about doing that as well in your cover letter.
I've always heard that you shouldn't use I a lot. So what do you feel about that? Is there a limit when you can use I in cover letter?
I don't know that there's a limit. The biggest thing is it's just learning to write better. Probably another big mistake, and I think it's one of the things mentioned here later on, is students or cover letters, every paragraph starts with the same word, the or I. Rewrite the sentence, right? A lot of times you can take the last half of the sentence and put it first with a comma, and it'd be a preface, and then write. So you've just got to do enough editing of that. You can say my. So again, you don't want to say I worked at such and such and did whatever. You could say when working at, one of my responsibilities was blah 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 blah. And so that's how you've kind of taken out the word I, if that makes sense.
I have a big question, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's about cover letters, but it's about an interview too. And I don't know if that can apply here, but for an internship, is it? I was having a conversation with a girl yesterday about how the internship can help me because this specific position has not hired people because they seem overqualified because they think they can't learn anything. I thought it was important in an answer that she asked. She was kind of asking me questions that I should be expecting, and I had said something about how there were qualities in the women that I would work for that I would like to mirror in myself. And in that sense, the job is helping me. So is that something I shouldn't be talking about?
I think that's applicable because you are showing people that you're a learner and you're willing to learn, you're open to learning. I think that's a skill anybody hiring is wanting to look for.
Okay.
I think and I think it's more appropriate for internships in the sense of nobody wants to hire an intern who thinks they already know it all, right? I've heard that over and over again. They want to know that you're coming in to an internship opportunity to learn. So you could say, like, these are things I already have. So start out with what you can do to benefit, but say, I also recognize that through this opportunity, this would give me a chance to develop these specific skills that I would like to continue working on professionally. A way to word it, too, that I've seen a lot of times in job applications is I look forward to the challenge of this position. These are opportunities I've wanted to have in my career but haven't had so far, and so the challenge of this position is exciting to me. That's then letting them know that, hey, you recognize, like, you don't know this, but you want to do it. So that's a different way to kind of turn it around. Any other questions about that? That's a good one. Yep, so tips for success. Vary your sentence structure. So always go through. One thing I'd encourage, I'll look at your cover letter right now. Does the first paragraph start with the same word? Is the first word of every paragraph the same thing? If not, you're good. I would also say if the first word of your paragraph is I, circle it. That's probably a sentence we need to look at restructuring, okay? So be careful with overusing I, my, and me. And again, that's just one of those of like thinking through multiple ways to say things. Make sure your paragraphs are in common thoughts. Sometimes you'll just see where people have just like typed up this letter and they've been like, I really want this job. I'm really good at this. I had this previous experience and I'm really good at this too. All the things that you're writing that you're good at, put together. All the past experiences you've had, put together. Again, organize it. Use supporting examples. So if you are going to say that you work well with a team, explain why you work well with a team. What experience was it that you had? This is why you've got to really figure out what are the 2 or 3 things you want to focus on, because there's just not going to be enough room to put it all. But they're going to want a specific example. Saying things like, I work well with teams, I'm a good communicator. Those are really vague, and there's not really like a measuring stick for it, right? But if you can give them an example of working on a class project and things weren't going well and you had to be the one that jumped in and helped get everyone on board and you accomplished the task in a timely manner, you just gave them justification or understanding of how you actually work as a team member, okay? Again, be focused on the employer and sound confident. Okay, don't downplay what you do. I have this struggle a lot of times when I write anything out about myself that I never feel like anything I do is on my own, and I always say we, because, right, like we accomplished more together. We did this. It sucks, but now's not the time and place to. You've got to own what you did, what you're capable of doing, and so. Be confident in that. You know what you contributed to a group. You know what you contributed to a team. It's about you, okay? You're interviewing for these positions, not the team or the people that you worked with. So,
this is kind of related. So the job description I found, the name of the job was HR specialist. So what do I, like, do you always spell out human resources even though it was listed on the website as HR?
So spell it out if you know it, but then what you'll do is just like you would do in a paper that you wrote. There's no marker. So if it says, HR specialist, you'll spell out human resources, and then you'll put in parentheses HR.
Okay.
So then if you refer back to it in that last paragraph or somewhere else, then you can just write HR specialist the next time. Same thing with anything that would be abbreviated, right? So if in that first paragraph you're telling them you're a student at OSU, you need to spell out Oklahoma State. But then put in parentheses OSU, because if you refer back to it again, you don't want to have to take up space by writing Oklahoma State. You can just say OSU and they know what it's connected to.
Relating back to like the project in this class, like when we put out our like job like flyers or whatever, should we put like on there somewhere like who to kind of make this stuff out to, or like if they don't, do we do like intern hiring committee?
That's what y'all have to decide. Okay. Yep. And so that's where, as y'all are doing the research on your company and you see what kind of job postings they actually put out, what do they do? And if you don't know, You call their HR company and you say, is there one person who usually does this, or is it a committee? Y'all got to figure out, because you're trying to imitate them as much as possible. So, good question. Okay. Right? Again, same thing, no spelling or grammar mistakes. Always have more than 3 sets of eyes look at it. Your font and everything needs to match. So this goes again with the consistency with your resume. Because your cover letter is usually with your resume, you want those things to look like a package. So use the same font size, all of that. If you have, again, kind of a formatted heading on your resume, go ahead and have that same thing match on your cover letter and with your reference list. Limit to 1 page. All right, so very, very rarely do cover letters go on to a 2nd page. And then again, address to specific individuals. Try to avoid saying sir or madam. There's lots of reasons for that, but usually just who they are. Okay. I don't know what that. Oh, a thing to talk about. It's not specific with the cover letter and resume itself, but there's always this, like, after the interview, what do you do? Always send a thank you, right? 1 or 2 paragraphs. Even if it's a phone interview, always send it. And you want to be specific. You always want to reference back to something that was specifically talked about. And so one thing that I have found helpful over time is that as soon as I get done with an interview, I sit down for 30 minutes and I just write out everything I can remember about the conversation. I really liked this point, or, oh my God, like, I remember when I interviewed at Auburn, I was interviewing with a group of faculty, and one of the faculty members asked me something, and we talked about it. And then, like, 2 days later, I was like, oh, I wish I would have mentioned this. So when I wrote that faculty member a thank you note, and I was like, thinking back to our conversation, I also wanted to add this point, and da-da-da-da-da. Again, it was really nice meeting you. So again, it shows more initiative than just a generic, it was so nice meeting you, thank you for considering me for the job. No, like you really have been thinking about it and reflected on the interview. Again, be confident, reiterate why you're strong, and again, be confident in saying you look forward to hearing from them. You may never hear from them, but you want them to know that you're expecting that on your end.
I remember through like job interviews through FFA, one of the main things always to do is get business cards from them, so then you can address all of them and send them each that personally.
Yes.
So then you're not just sending, oh, here HR, here you go.
Yes, always. That's a good thing. Always collect business cards if you can. If you're not in a situation where they have one, again, write down their name right after, because you can usually go to their website and find who they are and contact them. I've been in several interviews where that's been the case, and I've just had to be like afterwards, like, okay, who all was sitting at that table? I didn't know so-and-so was going to pop in. And if you send one, like, sometimes we get them, like, prospective grad students will come and interview here for assistantships, and we get a generic, like, dear AECL department. Who sees that, right? Like, I don't know, but when they send one to me and say, hey, thank you so much for going to lunch with me today, it's just more personable. So you do want to do those one-on-ones. Do you do email or letter thank yous?
Handwritten letter.
Handwritten. The only time an email is ever appropriate is if you know they are making like an immediate decision tomorrow. And the only way you're going to know that is if they tell you that. Okay? So, yeah, I've never sent an email thank you. Always handwritten, and literally, like, I've traveled to job interviews with thank you notes in my bag so that on the flight or wherever I was getting lunch or dinner, I just went ahead and wrote them. Like, you want to do it. You don't want it to be something that is 3 weeks down the road, because they may have already made a decision by that point, so right away. So that's kind of it about cover letters. As y'all look at the cover letters that you've prepared, what are some things that you have questions about that maybe you're seeing now may be different on yours or different from things you've been told in the past?
Okay, so if we need to match our resume heading and this, but our name's on our resume, like, but we don't want to put our name right now, like in the top, how do we make it match them?
just do it that traditional way. Yeah, so you're never going to be wrong if you just go the traditional way and it doesn't match. So I'm trying to think if anybody has one that I could show y'all would be an example of like, so y'all know when you get things like letterhead. Have y'all gotten letters before that have letterhead? If you have like that type of design for your resume, use it. But if it's not, if you just were centering your name, your address, whatever, that's not a heading. That's not a template. So I wouldn't duplicate that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions?
Would you like mind writing like what you do for the recipient address? Like you do yours first, and then it's just like the name of the business, like what office it is and their address. Is that all you do?
Yeah. So if I were going to write a letter to, if I were going to write a letter to Farm Bureau, right? I'm applying for a job like Farm Bureau. Y'all all are putting in my address now. So I would put my address first. And again, you're spelling everything out, right? So East Baker Court, Stillwater, Oklahoma, 075. Then we're going to space it. Today is the 13th. And then I'm going to put Oklahoma Farm Bureau Department. And again, I'm making up off of what I know others do. Department of Human Resources. I don't know. 111 Farm Lane, Oklahoma City.
Yes, I've definitely seen that before. It's just like I needed the visual.
Yep. And numbers, and then you would say, dear, whoever.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Does that help?
Okay, I think she asked this, but I just want to clarify because I was kind of lost. I have a heading, this heading, on mine, and you said probably shouldn't include it. Because mine's not really like a fancy heading.
Yeah.
Do I need that up there, or should I just do that?
Just do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Because honestly, the spacing was funked up anyway, so I had
And I was going to say, that'll honestly give you probably more room there, because your name, it's all going to be the same size. That's probably another thing, too, is you'll notice with the cover letter, there wasn't anything that was bolded. Everything needs to be the same font size. Nothing needs to be bolded. So that's one thing that's different than your resume, is you're not really making headings per se. So make sure everything is on the left margin. So nothing needs to be aligned to the right or centered. Everything's aligned to the left margin. You can indent the first line of a paragraph if you want to, but really for professional letters, because you're spacing between paragraphs, everything can be, again, left aligned, and it still be considered professional. That helps too with spacing. I know those are like weird little things, but think about it. If you're not indenting half an inch, that's potentially 3 words that could be pulled up that doesn't take up another line on your page. So, any other? Those are great questions.
What is your rule of thumb with signature lines?
You know your signature. I would say a minimum of 3 spaces between the sincerely for you to truly be able to sign your name. So if you're getting there and your letter's super wordy and you're not going to be able to sign them online. So I would give yourself 3. So honestly, when I start typing letters, I always put this information in first and go ahead and put signature in, so then I know how much space I have to work with when I'm writing.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Okay, do you electronically sign for like ones that go through email? Or do you, I don't know why.
So you can, and that's where, if you're going to do an electronic signature, do your signature in blue ink.
Oh.
Take a picture or scan it.
Okay.
So like my electronic signature that I have right now, I just took a white piece of paper, I signed my name, I scanned it and emailed it to myself, and then I cropped it, and I just plug it in to letters.
So you do it on electronic ones too?
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
And then save it as a PDF. Again, always do that. Always save your cover letter as a PDF. So if you're attaching it to something electronically, it needs to be a PDF.
And you mentioned even if it doesn't ask for a cover letter, do one anyway. So do you just attach that with your resume?
Yep. And so you do want to keep them separate files. So people
But
aren't.
just like upload to yours.
Yep.
And it's references. Separate.
Because if they don't want to read it, then they don't have to open it. But you've at least got it. So, good question, y'all. So I guess just to kind of wrap up there, I know we're going to start our meetings today with some of y'all to look these over. I'll stop recording this.